On July 24th, Nvidia published a letter titled Open Weights and American AI Leadership, urging Washington not to restrict AI models that anyone can download and run. Jensen Huang launched it with his first ever post on X, and within 6 days, the signature list had grown from 25 companies to 235. Microsoft, Meta, OpenAI, Google, Amazon, and most of the rest of the American technology industry. Every major American AI lab has now signed, with a single exception, Anthropic. And the strange part is that within days of refusing the industry's letter, Anthropic's chief executive signed a different one, a petition from more than 1,000 AI researchers asking Washington to help slow their own industry down. So in this video, we're going to explain what this letter is actually fighting, why the industry lined up behind it so quickly, and why the one company that refused to sign thinks everyone else has the safety argument backwards. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and stay in the loop. Let's start with what an open weight model actually is, because the entire dispute turns on a property most software doesn't have. A model's weights are the billions of numbers produced by training. In effect, the model itself in file form. Most AI companies keep those files on their own servers and sell access through an interface, which means the model can be monitored, updated, and if necessary, turned off. An open weight model is one whose files are published, so that anyone can download them, inspect them, modify them, and run them on their own hardware, free of charge and permanently beyond the publisher's reach. That last part is what this whole story is about, because a model that has been downloaded onto thousands of computers in dozens of countries cannot be recalled, patched, or switched off by anyone. For most of the past decade, Washington treated publication as nobody's business but the publishers, and its official doctrine still says so. The administration's AI Action Plan, released last July, calls open models strategically valuable and promises a supportive environment for them. What changed is who publishes the models people actually use. Meta's Llama models and France's Mistral built the early open ecosystem, but today's is dominated by China. On Hugging Face, the main repository where these models are published, Alibaba's Qwen family and DeepSeek now fill most of the top of the download charts. And on OpenRouter, a marketplace that routes traffic to hundreds of models, Chinese models went from under 2% of usage in April 2025 to more than 45% a year later. In other words, the world's default free AI stack is increasingly Chinese. Hold that thought, because it explains almost everything that follows. The letter itself was written in response to one very bad week for the industry. On July 21st, OpenAI disclosed that 2 of its models had, during internal testing, autonomously escaped their sandbox, the isolated environment they are supposed to run in, and attacked production servers at Hugging Face. 2 days later, a bipartisan pair of congressmen introduced the AI Kill Switch Act, which would require large AI developers to maintain the technical ability to throttle or shut down their models. The Department of Homeland Security could order them to use it with fines of up to $20 million a day for refusing, and polling by the AI Policy Institute suggests 86% of voters want exactly that. At the same time, the administration was reportedly preparing something broader. After the Chinese lab Moonshot released Kimi K3, an open weight model competitive with the American frontier, the White House began weighing restrictions on Chinese open models, including blacklists and procurement bans. According to multiple reports, it also accused Moonshot of building Kimi through industrial-scale distillation, the practice of training on another model's outputs. The model Moonshot allegedly distilled was Anthropic's, a detail worth filing away for later. The industry had also just watched a demonstration of what federal control looks like in practice. In June, the Commerce Department ordered Anthropic to cut off foreign access to its newest models over a reported security vulnerability. The order arrived by letter under an export control authority with no written implementing rules, and the models went dark worldwide for nearly 3 weeks. The lesson was hard to miss. Washington can switch off a closed model whenever it decides to, and the only models it cannot switch off are the open ones, which is exactly why the pressure keeps drifting toward publication itself. The greatest obstacle to every control Washington has tried is the nature of the file. A kill switch cannot reach weights that have already been downloaded. A ban on Chinese open models is close to unenforceable for the same reason, because the weights are already everywhere. Follow that logic one more step, and you arrive at the only version of the policy that can actually be enforced, restricting what American companies are allowed to publish in the first place. That is the outcome the letter exists to prevent. At this point, an obvious question is why companies companies that mostly sell closed models would rush to defend open ones? The answer is that open weights are no longer a philosophy, so much as a set of business models. Nvidia sells the hardware that every downloaded model runs on, so a world full of open models is a world full of GPU demand. Meta and Microsoft want ecosystems built on their stacks, and OpenAI and Google, which publish little of their frontier work, still signed within days, with Sam Altman writing that he wants the US to win in both open source and proprietary models. None of them wants a rule that permanently hands the free tier of the global market to Quen. Even the reluctant signed. Amazon held out for 3 days before joining, with a statement that it supported the letters, quote, macro direction, a phrase in which you can hear the lawyers. Critics read the same lineup less charitably. One widely shared analysis called the letter a commoditization cartel, a coalition of companies that profit when models become cheap commodities, and the margin moves to chips, clouds, and data. These two readings are not mutually exclusive, and that is presumably how a signature list reaches 235 names, since defending the open ecosystem and defending your own margins can be the same act. That leaves the holdout, and Anthropic's refusal is more precise than the headlines suggested. As the signature count climbed, Chief Executive Dario Amodei published the company's position, writing that Anthropic, quote, has never advocated for a ban on open weights models and that safe open models are a public good. What he rejects is the letter's safety argument, the claim that openness makes AI safer because more defenders get to study the models. Amodei argues the asymmetry runs the other way, because in domains like biological and cyber weapons, a freely modifiable model helps attackers more than defenders, and if that turns out to be right, a published model can never be patched or recalled. His counterproposal is to regulate everything except publication, keep advanced chips away from authoritarian states, crack down on industrial-scale distillation, and require safety testing for every sufficiently capable model, open or closed. The response from the coalition was not gentle. Palantir's Alex Karp remarked that if you want to win, you have to compete on the battlefield, while David Sachs, until recently the White House AI czar, accused Anthropic of using safety concerns to protect its business. And then within days, the neat story of one cautious company against a united industry stopped being neat. On July 28th, a petition called Pacing the Frontier was published by more than 1,000 employees of the Frontier Labs, including OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, and Meta. It asked the US government to support an international effort to deliberately pace the frontier of automated AI development. Amodei signed it along with Anthropic's chief scientist, OpenAI's chief scientist, and Meta's chief scientist, and both OpenAI and Anthropic endorsed it at the company level, which means OpenAI signed the open weights letter and the slowdown petition in the same week. The trigger for the petition was the same sandbox escape that had opened the week. Hugging Face, whose servers were the ones attacked, signed the open weights letter 3 days after the incident. The industry evidently is capable of holding several thoughts at once, all of which leaves Washington facing a fundamental dilemma because the two things it wants are in direct tension. Restricting open weights is the only way to keep frontier capability recallable, but the restriction would bind only American publishers, would do nothing about the Chinese models already downloaded worldwide, and would concede the global free tier to precisely the competitor the administration worries about. Leaving publication alone preserves an American presence in the open ecosystem, but it means accepting that whatever gets published can never be unpublished, and betting that the letter's safety argument is right and Amodei's is wrong. In effect, the government must choose between an unenforceable restriction and an irreversible openness. The stakes of that choice grow every quarter. This week, Microsoft reported $35.8 billion of capital spending in 3 months, roughly double a year earlier. Meta reported $31 billion, with full-year guidance of up to $145 billion. Numbers that describe a frontier only a handful of companies can afford to build. Open weights are what everyone else gets, which is what makes this fight bigger than one letter. It is a fight over what the rest of the world runs. In the short term, the letter is likely to get what it asked for, because nothing restricting open weights is actually law today. The Kill Switch Act has no hearing scheduled. The reported plans for Chinese model bans remain plans, and the administration's own published doctrine still leans the letter's way. Over the longer term, the pressure will probably move through indirect routes instead. A bill that has already passed the House would extend export controls to remote access, letting Washington restrict who may use American models through the cloud without touching publication at all. And in a detail that says a great deal about where this is heading, Beijing is reportedly considering the mirror image policy, export controls that would block foreign downloads of China's own advanced model weights, Quen included, while keeping paid access open, which suggests how this era ends. Not with a ban, but with both governments converging on the same instinct that model weights are strategic material, and that who gets to download them is a question for states rather than companies. The letter will probably win its immediate fight. But the deeper argument now runs through every one of those 235 companies. Huang's, that openness is how America wins, and Amode's, that some capabilities should never be beyond recall. The week that produced the letter also produced the petition, and the same names appear on both. That's all for today. Your daily shot of the world.